Welcome back to Weather Nation. We're taking a look at Gulfport, Mississippi, and also Destin, Florida. These are two areas under the threat of a potential tropical storm as we head throughout the weekend. And we're talking about subtropical storm at the moment, Alberto, and it's moving toward the Gulf Coast. And we now have new information too, specifically for Florida. A state of emergency has just been issued because of this impending storm. So again, we want you to take this very seriously, that there's a storm threat headed your way, as many people are not necessarily thinking about storms or anything. They're thinking about the weekend. They're thinking about holiday. They're thinking about having fun with their family and friends. But again, this is a threat we want you to take seriously. So let's talk a little bit more. Again, we have the state of emergency that was just issued for the state of Florida. They're advising, that is the state government, they're advising people to use caution, again, with this impending storm. And we're talking about heavy rain, not only for western parts of Cuba, but also for Florida and also for the Gulf Coast. And when we take a look at some of the other hazards that are out there, we have coastal flooding concerns, we have rip current concerns, we have storm surge concerns. It's a lot going on with this system, so we really want you to be aware of what's on the way. And here it is right here, moving to the north at about 9 miles per hour, still has maximum sustained winds at about 40 miles per hour. Now again, this storm is called a subtropical storm because a lot of the thunderstorm activity is not focused around the center of the storm. A lot of it in this case is on the eastern side and northern side of the storm. This storm will become more tropical when we start to see it take a typical tropical storm shape, and we have a lot of the thunderstorm activity focused right around the center of the storm. But because we don't have that now, again, we're talking about a subtropical storm. Either way, as we track this system over the next couple of days, we're talking about it gaining strength. So by the time we get to Sunday morning, we'll likely have max winds with this system at 45 miles per hour. It'll reach warm waters across eastern parts of the Gulf. And by the time we get to Monday, we're talking about winds reaching up to 65 miles per hour sustained. Now, at this point, we're not expecting this storm to form into an actual hurricane. It'll likely be a tropical storm at this point, but it is something we have to keep an eye on because we've seen it before. As storms actually approach the coast, we've seen them actually transition into a hurricane. Either way, whether it's a tropical storm or a hurricane, we're still talking about impacts. And as it's potentially making landfall late Monday into Tuesday, we're talking about sustained winds potentially across the Gulf Coast, right around 60 miles per hour, with gusts even higher than that. On top of that, as we watch this system move inland, it'll still be out there, it'll be weakening, but we're still talking about rain and some wind concerns. And because of all the rain, we'll still have flooding concerns out there as well. And take a look at the rain that's on the way. Again, we mentioned that Florida is under a state of emergency now. We're talking about some very heavy rain across western parts of Florida, and we're also looking at that across western parts of Florida into the Panhandle, and even across places like southern Alabama and even southern Mississippi. So the threat for heavy rain is definitely there. We already have flash flood alerts that are out there now for central and southern parts of Florida and also for parts of the Gulf Coast. As we slide over toward Florida, some of these areas could pick up more than 8 inches of rain. That amount of rain in a very short window of 2 to 3 days, that will lead to a lot of issues, flooding and all sorts of problems for people who are in these regions. So again, that's why the state government is encouraging you all to use caution with this storm approaching. And as we look toward the Gulf Coast, we're talking about flooding concerns across eastern parts of Louisiana, southern Mississippi, all the way over toward western Florida, including Pensacola, where we have our very own Ben McMillan. He'll be there throughout the day today, giving us more updates. But again, we're talking about a tropical system. And because of that, we have a tropical storm watch covering some of these same areas from places like New Orleans all the way over toward Panama City Beach and even areas farther east. And as we take a look at the storm surge concerns, they're out there as well. So this is the focus of where this storm could go. And so all the impacts are in those places. Now here's a quick look at the severe weather outlook. Let's take you now to video out of Texas. They were dealing with severe storms yesterday, and we're talking about more of that storm threat on the way for today across the high plains and also expanding across the high plains as we head throughout the next couple of days. Now take a look at the map again. We have this slight risk in place across eastern parts of Montana and to western parts of North Dakota. In these areas, we're talking about scattered severe storms sweeping across the region. And we're also talking about damaging wind and hail being big threats. When we take a look at Sunday, we're noticing that storm threat expanding and shifting east just a little bit. So we're talking about storms across the high plains, but also stretching into the upper Midwest. And across parts of the south and east with that tropical system, we could likely get some weak spin-up tornadoes. So that's why we're dealing with that threat. And then Monday again, storms are out there. So please be aware of the threat. Now, we'll be telling you more about what's going on, but all next week, we're talking hurricanes. Make sure you tune in.